out to provide every child with the opportunity that he or she deserves to be prepared for the future. Make every child college and career ready, have a fair, accurate, consistent accountability standards. So he's made a lot of huge commitments and promises to our children. And the college and career ready is very much the Pennsylvania core in alignment with the national standards. The Pennsylvania core standards are a little more stringent than the national standards. So in order to do this, they have implemented those Pennsylvania core standards to make our children college and career ready. Now, he's also committed himself to have a fair and accurate and consistent accountability standard. He also said that accountability measures that do not overburden. He doesn't want measures that do not fairly account for performance. So, in line with this, he also said that, and this is from the letter that we received from Secretary of Education Pedro Rivera, School Performance Profile, which is our score that we get for the school to indicate how our children have performed in alignment with the standards. That needs to be revised to be a more comprehensive measure of school and student performance beyond the singular high-stakes testing. I was happy to see this because in any use of data, they tell you it has to be triangulated and has to be multiple sources of data. So in this statement from that letter, I thought, you know what, we're on the right path, and maybe this governor is seeing things that should have been seen a long time ago because he's looking beyond this singular high-stakes testing.
Hold on.
Now, we've been told that this year's PSSA scores will establish a new baseline from which to measure future student progress. The tests this year, as Ms. Piazza said, were more fully aligned to more rigorous Pennsylvania core standards. And those were established in 2013. And this is the first time they field tested these questions in other assessments and prior assessments, but this was the first year they fully aligned this test to the Pennsylvania core standards. There were pervasive changes to the assessments. They increased the rigor, as Ms. Piazza said, they increased the rigor of the testing format and content, and they increased the threshold of the scores. So our students actually increased their scores, but did not meet up to the new threshold of scores. As they anticipated, and this is from their own language, the scores throughout the state have decreased, and as she said, it was 34% in math and 9% in reading on average. They tell us the results cannot be fairly compared to previous years, and consequently, the state has applied to the United States Department of Education for a waiver for 1-year pause in the 2015 scores for SPP for school and teacher evaluations. So they're not, in other words, they're not counting these scores this year for school performance profile. This is basically what our scores are for in grade 5. We had 11% advanced, 40% proficient, so 51% of our students in grade 5 were proficient in ELA, in English and Language Arts. Basic 33% and 16% were below basic. In math, 8% were advanced, 21% proficient, so 29% of our students achieved proficiency, basic 35%, below basic 36%. 6th grade, 17% were advanced, 38% were proficient, which gives us 55%, and 33% were basic, 12% were below basic. In math, 7%. These were huge drops from, even though we're not comparing it to the prior year, these are huge drops. 7% were advanced, 28% proficient, which gives us 35% proficiency. Basic, 39%, 26% were below basic. 7th grade, 18% were advanced in reading and language arts, and 42%, which gives us about 60% proficiency in ELA in 7th grade, 33% were basic, and 7% were below basic. Math, 6% advanced, 18% were proficient, 24% had achieved proficiency, and 39% basic, 37% below basic. And in English in 8th grade, we had 13% advanced, 45% were proficient, which gives us a 58% proficiency or above in English and Language Arts, 32% basic, 10% below basic. In science, which is only tested in 8th grade, 20.7% were advanced, 30.9% were proficient, basics 21.3% were basics, and below basic 27.1%. In math in 8th grade, 2% were advanced, 14% were below basic, were proficient, which gives us about 16% proficient or above, 34% basic, 50% below basic. In our Keystones, the students who are taking the Keystone exams in the 7th and 8th grade, 43% of those students were advanced, 47.9% were proficient, which gives us about I wasn't an advanced teacher in math, I'm an advanced student in math, so I think that's 90.9%, almost 91% of our students were proficient or better in the Keystones, and 9.9% were below basic, and we did not have enough to report or remaining or below basic. Now, what are we doing to respond to these areas of need? Even though we've been told by the state that they will not count, we've still taken these scores extremely seriously, and we've strategized to help increase our children's performance. We have been working in the 5-6 building for the last 2 years to kind of defy the the phenomenon that occurs all throughout the state. When the children go to middle school, they drop, and they're showing that if they come to middle school in the 5th grade, they drop, their performance drops in the PSSA in 5th grade. If they come in 6th grade, it drops in the 6th grade. So we've been working with the IU and the state for the last 2 years intensively to rectify to see if we can defy that phenomenon and increase our scores, and we have increased the scores in the 5-6 building. This year, we're making it consistent, 5 through 8. We've united all the curricular departments 5 through 8, so coordinators are working with all teachers throughout the entire campus. We've become a learning community, a larger learning community, because we're sharing very effective strategies that we're using in classrooms, and we're basing our work on the following strategies. We're doing quarterly administration and study on benchmark testing in reading, math, and science. We have detailed item analysis reports that teachers are printing out, and they're analyzed by the staff during quarterly data team meetings. We've implemented quarterly data team meetings all throughout the entire campus. So what happens is, once we get the benchmark results from the study island administration, we meet as a group, we discuss the trends in the school, where we're seeing certain areas of need and where we're seeing certain areas where we're really strong, and we're creating more targeted math and reading interventions that respond to the identified learning needs in our children. We've also implemented a new nature of science rotation to supplement the science curricular concepts for grade 7 students, and we're aligning, as Mr. Vitro said, we're aligning the science curriculum more closely to the state standards. We've implemented a new math series in grade 7 and 8. Grade 6 is going to implement that series next year, but that series is more aligned to Pennsylvania Common Core, and it also has an intervention program that the teachers have found to be extremely effective, because they've been working throughout the past couple of years to align our curriculum with the Pennsylvania Common Core. And math, actually, it was more of an onerous task with the math department than it was with the reading, because reading seemed to be more aligned than the math. Some of the other things that we have put in is common formative assessments aligned to Pennsylvania core standards. Our teachers are using the Pennsylvania Department of Education sampler. Ms. Piazza talked about the mechanics of the test. The big difference with this test is the formulation of the questions. The questions on this test, it's not that the kids don't know the answers to it, they do know the material, it's just the way the question is formulated. So our teachers have been working very hard to reformat questions in a higher order thinking format, which is more aligned with the PSSA questioning format. And that's actually available online through the PD sampler. So the teachers are working to reformulate questions in class and also questions on tests so that everybody's in alignment. We also have Lafayette tutors coming in to work with our children in programs. Professor Root is working very closely with our math teachers so that he can implement some work with them with Common Core, and also he's bringing in people after school to work with remedial classes after school. And we're working with responsive staff development on effective diagnostic tools such as CDTs that will foster growth in all of our students. And that basically is my report for this evening. Any questions?
Dr. Simi, I'd just like to say that in spite of what I think, your optimism related to the rhetoric from Harrisburg, and in spite of the fact that the tests were more difficult this year, we saw a typical response, if you will, to the release of the test scores where schools were graded by somebody. I'm assuming that those grades were assigned by agents of the media in some way or another, because I'm not sure that we were told that certain scores aligned to a grade. Have you ever heard that?
No.
No.
That was, I have heard that it was reported by media, but I've never
Yes.
heard that the state was actually participating in such a grading.
Have you been in conversation with anyone where where it was said that if you score a certain range on a test this year, that equals this grade?
For the K to E.
Any. Has
We've
grading
received-
been a
no,
factor?
we've received
PSSA
notification
score
from the
for
state.
the high
Well,
school.
my point is, I want you to notice their reaction to what I just asked, and I want you to see that we are once again subject to this atrocity, which is high-stakes testing and the labeling of schools, communities, parents, teachers, and so on. It's disgracefully unfair when you consider the fact that most of the schools that were shown on the graph were from the urban centers in Lehigh Valley. It is still a very disturbing set of circumstances to me that we have populations of poverty in this country and in our community that are doing everything possible to get by, to keep their families going and sending their kids to school. And we have these consistent annual reminders about how difficult life is for all of these people with these test scores. It's very difficult to keep enthusiasm going in a school. I can tell you that if you polled students, parents of the high schools who didn't do so well in the test, that the majority of those students would indicate they don't consider their programs or their high schools core institutions of learning. There are other measurements that should be employed here to give fuller pictures of the educational experience that kids are receiving in schools. And we're still focused on this high-stakes testing conundrum. And I'm sorry to say that I don't know. I hope that your enthusiasm continues, and I hope that there is something behind that we can point to in the future. I'm not so sure anymore. Not after I saw what happened this past week with the test scores in the Lehigh Valley.
We have a school community of professionals who are very committed to children, and they remain focused and they continue to work for the betterment of every child. We have not forgotten that commitment. We maintain our enthusiasm and our passion. We won't accept anything less. We're looking forward to next year so we can show how much we've grown, and we're learning a lot from each other. We're learning a lot from the children, and we will meet the challenge. We're up for it.
Absolutely,
so
we will.
I'm hoping the governor, with that commitment, I'm hoping he stands by that commitment, because that's the first time I've seen in print someone say that we need multiple sources of data to really judge a school. So if he does what he says he's going to do, and he actually printed something like that, I mean, it won't be the first time somebody printed something and didn't live up to their promise. But that's a pretty strong commitment, and he needs to be held to that. And if that's where he's going, we're hearing our president say the same thing. So I'm hoping that it becomes somewhat, it starts to gain momentum, because it really needs to be done. There's so much more to a school than 4 days of testing. There's another 184 days where children thrive and develop and grow and learn. And so I'm hoping that that's what happens. We'll have to wait and see. But as far as the commitment, our I-2A community commits itself. We're going to continue. We're going to keep growing every day and working to make our program the best that we possibly can provide for our children. Thank you.
You let me off the hook. Come on. I'm going to try to bring more enthusiasm than Charlene just did. And to be honest with you, I think, Mr. Ryan, I'm going to bring some light to what you just mentioned regarding scores for the high school. And there is a lot of positive data coming out of our high school, and there's a lot of great things going on in the ways of testing. Unfortunately, the score for our SPP is weighted heavily in the area that has become our Achilles heel, so to speak. 37%, 37.5% of the SPP score comes from the Keystone Literature Assessment alone. And right now, that is the area in which our school has been stagnant in growth. It is double the value of the math and the science. And so that's, when we talk about an accurate measure of performance or a more global approach to what a school's success might look like, I think they have many of the measures in the SPP score to show those. The issue right now is that one of those measures, which takes place during one testing event, is grossly exaggerated right now. And I don't be honest with Ms. Ryan, I have no idea why that is. And I haven't noticed it until now. And here's why. If you look up what's in front of you folks, the last 3 years of our SPP score, we've gone from 47% proficient in algebra in 2012-13 to 63% proficient. That is a 16% increase in 3 years in algebra. That is significant. That is just outstanding work on behalf of our math staff, our teachers in aligning curriculum, and us putting necessary supports in place for that to occur. I can't see anyone else in the state that's making that sort of growth in that particular area. In biology, we started off at 34%. And what I'll say about 12-13 is that during that year, that was the baseline year that they're talking about now for Common Core for the elementary. Except during that year, no one said, don't worry about it, it's a baseline. They came out and said schools are failing, high schools are not making the grade, and we got on that list, so to speak. And that's what Mr. Reinhardt, is explaining, because that list is one that we have to send out to parents and let them know and make them available to them that they can go to other schools, which is absolutely ridiculous. But biology, 34%, 58% this school year. That is a 24% increase from 12-13 to 14-15. Literature, as I mentioned before, the unfortunate part of the SPP score is 37.5% of that score comes from the literature assessment. 10% of that comes from the actual grade students receive in terms of being proficient or not, and the other 22.5% comes from, or certainly 50%, the other 22.5% comes from growth. And so if you're not increasing your scores, you're obviously not growing. And so when we look at those scores, looking at the SPP score overall, you see 64.3, 64.9, I apologize, the 65.8 should be on the right, but we went up to a 65.8. So as Mr. Reinhardt mentioned, people look at that historically and say, that's a D, right? So that this is a D grade assigned to Eastern Area High School, and if you look at the data, that is not representative of the type of school that we are and the performance that we're seeing, even on the assessments that they're using to measure us.
Well, that slide is a perfect illustration of my point. And I would ask you to examine or to consider the fact that you have a 16% increase in one, a 24% increase in another. Does that constitute, is what happened this week to the news surrounding Easton High School in these tests, is what happened a fair assessment of what that indicates? No, it's grossly unfair. It's embarrassing to think that the public latches on to such vague generalizations and makes such generalizations about schools filled with kids. It's very sad, very, very unfortunate. So I really am glad that you brought that slide to share that information with us.
The second slide shows actually the growth last school year that we made in just 1 year. So what you're looking, what's that?
What happened to that orange?
Yeah, it's Anne's computer.
My fault. Always
She's running
technology.
on Leopard or El Capitan or Yosemite 3 or when I'm working with a PowerPoint program that's probably back in Libra or Tiger or Scorpio or I can't figure it out. I don't know whether they're cats or lions or what are we working on now? Yosemite?
You have
El
lion.
Capitan.
I never update my computer. Maybe I'll get some time when I'm not reviewing SPP scores to update
there
my
you go.
computer. But all kidding aside, folks, this is some very important data. Last year alone, so when we talk about, Shirley talks about interventions and remediation programs, since the implementation of our new schedule and the opportunity to enrich and remediate during the course of the school day, in 11th grade alone, we started last school year, the 11th grade students at 47% in algebra. By the end of the year, those students who had retested, we had a 12% increase, and we moved that number from 47 to 59%. In biology, that number was 46 to start the school year. Through interventions and remediation, our students increased by 8% to a 54% total at the end of the year. And that number has actually increased because I was basing that on our numbers before the SPP score came back. 52% in literature, up to 63%. So we did see last year an increase in the 11th grade students. However, they did not increase from the overall score from the previous year's kids. Understand those scores come from the 11th grade students that school year. So this data is the students who are currently in the senior year and the class of 2016. The school performance profile, that 65 number, includes SAT scores and graduation rates for the class of the previous year, of those seniors. So it is somewhat of an approach, and the growth is actually measured by any student taking the Keystone examination in grades 9, 10, and or 11. So the next slide and shows us the starting points.
Sorry, is that not the right one?
Oh, it's good.
Hold on. Yeah.
The starting points for this year, to give you an indication of right now our 11th grade class is at 54%. Last year we were only at 47. So what that tells us is that our core curriculum, students' first time opportunities to take the assessment, is improving test scores. So last year we started at 47, this year we're at 54, we're up 7%. Last year we were at 46%, this year we're at 54 to start the year, we're up 8%. Last year we're at 52, this year we're at 58, we're up 6%. So what that's also telling us is not only the remediation taking place in 11th grade, but it's also that the first-time test takers enrolled in algebra, literature, and biology are improving their success rate on this particular assessment. So most of the data, besides the 65.8, is very positive, of course with the exception of literature. And that is something that we are focusing our attention on because it really is a cross-the-board area. Reading in the content area happens in history classrooms, it happens in science classrooms, it happens in your tech ed and your business courses. And it's more geared to what the new SAT is going to look like as well. So we are taking our time. Angie mentioned that we have common assessments that we're looking at, midterms and finals in our other core areas, in addition to math and science, math and English. One of those things that they're adding in is reading comprehension problems, in addition to reading comprehension instruction in those other content areas as well, which is extremely important. To give you an idea of where the state stood, I think there's been some averages. Right now, all students on the English is at 64.7. We are above that number. The average right now for 11th grade last year was 46% for mathematics. We are above that number significantly. And then in science, it's still, biology is still a tough assessment across the state. And our school is showing a trend that we're moving in the other direction. I can tell you there's a little bit of fear of a ceiling there with biology because if our reading scores don't improve, obviously the biology scores aren't going to improve. Students' ability to then maximize themselves in a content area is going to be limited to their reading abilities. And so we do anticipate our number that we're aiming for is obviously above 70%. In some of our areas, that's a difficult number to reach, but we are on task so to speak, to be able to do that. As Charlene mentioned, one of the things we have been using at the high school is the classroom diagnostic tools, which is a diagnostic assessment in English language arts, reading, algebra, and biology. And what that gives the teacher the ability to do is to target specific areas that align to the standards for each individual student to improve their score, so to speak. And one pitch I will make for the Keystone is, right now in literature and right now in mathematics, those types of questions that we're seeing on the Keystone are very similar to that of the new PSAT and the new SAT. So I hate to bring credence to the system in any way, but at the same time, I want just to emphasize how important that our student success on those assessments will eventually pay off for our students on the new SAT that's coming out this spring. And so we're prepared. As a school, we need some more time to get this together. But this positive data has been presented out to the staff. I am extremely proud of our students and our teachers for what they've done this far, and we have some work to do in literature. That's been reiterated to the staff as well, because that's really an area where all parties can pitch in, so to speak. So it's something that we're working on in high school. So the SPP score, if you want to click that real quick, just to show you. And you can do comparisons. If you go to PASPP, you can pick 2 or 3 high schools. You can do a comparison. What I would say is to look more than just the number in terms of the building level academic score, and look at the actual scores of the academics. Look at biology, look at literature, look at algebra, and then compare us to other schools. Because like I said, right now, one area which is grossly inflated on this is the literature. And if this is an accurate measure and it's it's fair, so to speak, then you wouldn't have one particular area that would have such a large weighting area, in my opinion. And in some of the other areas, like AP scores, SAT scores above 1350, they're extra point categories. So if you have 52% of your kids who get a 3 or better on AP courses, and we have 386 kids taking AP courses, that's an outstanding number. But you get a bonus point or 2 for that. You don't get a true measurement of that area. And so for some things, you get lots of credit, and other things you get very little. And so, I would look and say, if you're going to give someone a report card, let's have it measure what the school is doing, not just heavily weighted in 1 or 2 areas. Questions? Great audience. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, and I appreciate you both coming and disclosing that information. And once again, I don't want to beat a dead test, but the fact remains that this thing, I hope that you can see that painting schools and looking at schools in a very oversimplified manner is so very unfair. You really need to you need to assess what's happening, as you saw here tonight. And that's just not happening, and hasn't happened in the Commonwealth. Nobody seems to want to do that, and I appreciate your attention on this.
All right. Sorry about that. Next is Amelia. Thank you. A common theme that I think we've heard tonight has been focused on data literacy skills. And the step-by-step agreement that I've shared out with the board in preparation for tonight's meeting, tonight's discussion, is an agreement with a consulting group that would assist our administrators in our K-4 buildings on taking the first steps to improving our basic literacy skills in grades K through 2. Something that we heard from Mr. Koch was that the basic literacy skills that students have, they have an impact on students' comprehension, which also ultimately has an impact on their ability in other content areas as they move forward with school. So we've talked as an administration about that need to really focus our energies and our efforts on those basic literacy skills that students acquire in the K-2 grade levels. We also know through even the United Ways campaign, where their goal is to see students in grade 3 across the Lehigh Valley meeting proficiency on state assessment. So there's that push for the K-1-2 time to really have those basic literacy skills acquired. So we've looked through our Keystones to Opportunity grant, which we are currently in year 4 of, and trying to look at how we're strategically spending that money. The grant is based on improving literacy outcomes, our focus is on pre-K or birth to grade 2 here in Easton. That's what we were awarded the grant on. Much of our work over the past 3 years, the first 3 years of the grant, was spent on that pre-K and the transition to kindergarten. We now want to look as we go into year 4 and 5 of the grant on reallocating that money to have that impact now K1 and 2. We've kind of laid the groundwork, and now we want to move forward with spending our KTO money on grades K1 and 2, so that our students are really acquiring those basic literacy skills, so that as they go on into future years, they have those foundational building blocks. The agreement that I've proposed here this evening is an agreement that focuses specifically on training administrators to lead this initiative within our school district, training them on data analysis, on job-embedded coaching, on modeling, and things that they can take back into their buildings and really have a true impact on the instructional practices of our teachers. The ultimate goal is that this will take us from a balanced approach to literacy instruction to more of a multisensory approach to literacy instruction, which proves to have that impact then down the line for students. Step by Step is a group that has worked very successfully with local school districts. They work in Wilson, in Bethlehem, Bangor, Pleasant Valley, and a number of schools up in the Wilkes-Barre area as well. And they've had very successful outcomes, and that's one of the reasons why we turned to them to look for this type of assistance going forward into this school year. So I know I sent out the contract in the month of October, and then also had it on the agenda for discussion this evening. I'd like to answer any questions and hope that we can move this forward for next week's board meeting. But again, just restating, because I know we did have a conversation earlier this evening about spending money, and we should have those conversations. But this would be just a reallocation of funds that we currently have within our KTO grant. So it's reallocating or using them in a different manner.
So it was $140,000 that we had last year roughly in the KTO grant?
We have more than that, but we would be using part KTO, part Title II, and part Title I for this agreement, so that we're not taking all of the money out of what we're already spending on KTO.
And so those 3 areas would be decreased for whatever they did last year and put into here.
That's correct.
And the reason for the 7 days after the budget is just because again, we're not getting funded on this until the budget's approved.
Correct. Yeah, that was out of courtesy that they did that. What Mr. Fino is saying is that this company has agreed not to seek any funds, even though they will provide work for our school district, until at least 7 days after the state budget is passed. They said they don't think it's fair for them to seek any money from districts who aren't receiving it. So,
And are you assured that we'll get those funds?
yes, we do have a 5-year commitment for those funds. So those are actually federal dollars, they're just hung up right now.
They're hung up.
But yeah, we are assured of those.
Could you inform the board of what comes in terms of the preschool program?
Yes, I can. A part of this that this company has also offered will help us continue our pre-K efforts, even though now we're shifting our focus to K1-2, with a program called Teach Me to Learn at Home. That is an online program that they will offer unlimited subscriptions to any Easton resident who has a student or a child who is age 2 through 5. So that is online. That is something that we, should we be approved next week, that we would set up meetings with our pre-K partners so that we can start holding evenings where parents can come out and learn about this program so that they can be doing things at home with their children on the iPad, on the laptop, so that students or children in ages 2 through 5 are learning those early basic literacy skills that are age appropriate for them, so that as they come into us in kindergarten, they've already acquired that foundation.
Isn't this didn't they come to the diversity? Yes. Baron, do you remember that?
About a year ago.
Yes, it was a year ago, and that was one of the most exciting aspects of this whole relationship, is that we can open the door to a preschool, free preschool program available to all of our students in the district, ages 2 to 5. So, huge plus for that population of kids coming into the program.
Or statement.
you talk a little bit about the data analysis and about the risk, students at risk that are going to be identified. Those students are the 2 through 5 students that are going to be identified.
The grades, or the age 2 through 5?
Yeah, age 2 through 5. Or who's going to be identified in that, and how are we going to implement a program for those students at risk?
What we're using is, we're using our DIBBLS data, which is our dynamic indicator of basic early literacy skills, which we do that assessment periodically through the year at the elementary level. So they've assisted us in looking at that data, grades K through actually 4, looking at that and identifying where our kind of weak points are, where our strengths are as well, but then targeting the training that they're going to deliver to our administrators and ultimately out to our teachers so that we're kind of filling those gaps and bringing students up. What we found was that we are under what you would, or I should say, we have more students that are at risk than you would like to see of students in grades K1, 2. So we want to decrease that number. You want to see that 80% of your students are able to, through the core instruction, that they're able to, meet the gains that you expect. And we're not seeing that 80%. We see that we need more students that are receiving interventions in those grade levels. So we want to be able to change our practice and learn the science behind literacy instruction so that our teachers can more effectively provide that instruction at those levels so we decrease the number of students that need intervention.
So we're going to be looking at that closely to see.
Yes, yeah, that's something that, absolutely, and that's something that they'll be training our administrators in, is how to really dig into the data so that we can provide those interventions.
It says 8 administrators. Are you choosing those 8 administrators?
They would be, right now there are 7 elementary principals in the PSSA. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions on this?
And the CPEC committee.
Yes. I'm going to hand out a document here that talks about our continuing professional education and comprehensive planning committee that we need to form as a district. Our comprehensive plan for the school district will be up for submission to PDE next November, so November of 16. We have to do that every 3 years. But in preparation for that, we need to begin the planning phase. And we need to form a district-wide comprehensive planning committee. That district-wide comprehensive planning committee will double as our continuing professional education committee. So they will be one and the same. But I've listed out the people that need to be represented on that committee, and this is for both our school district policy, but also state guidance. And so we have the 6 teacher representatives, 2 educational specialists. Those are nurses, guidance counselors, or psychologists. 2 administrative representatives. And then the final 3 bullets of people that need to serve on that committee are parents of children attending a school in the district, appointed by the Board of School Directors, local business representatives appointed by the Board of School Directors, and other individuals representing the community who are also appointed by the Board of School Directors. So I outlined for you a process for how we can go about establishing this committee. We would like to have this committee established by January so that we can get the planning underway for both the professional development calendar for the 16-17 school year and also then ultimately for our comprehensive plan, which is due next November. So I have italicized what I would like to discuss here this evening with you. What would the process be to identify those non-district representatives? Things that we would need to consider are what the process is for nominating those people or selecting them, how many people per group, and then also the term of those individuals. We want them to serve on this committee for the 3-year term that the comprehensive plan is in existence, but that's really a board level discussion. We would then obviously secure the teacher representatives, administrator representatives who are going to sit on the committee, and we will schedule the meetings and hold the meetings. What we've identified is probably at 4 o'clock, no more than 6 times per year. So whomever we would be looking to place on that committee or appoint to that committee would not have a commitment of more than 6 meetings in a year. But I wanted to just share that out with the board because they are appointed by the Board of School Directors, so wanted to get some feedback on what you think our process should look like.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Double P heard on? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we discuss that now. I mean, we discuss that here, right?
Yeah, I mean, how we would go about the selection or nomination or,
Take recommendations from
Teachers.
board members, take recommendations from people who we might know who are active, parents and PTA. You know, I don't know.
Authority council would be able to.
Yeah.
Those.
We've got a confident number of community partners that help the choosing field.
that if we put that out and look to seek individuals, that do you feel confident that we would be able to appoint in the January board meeting? It's January 26th.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
even as we're talking about it, we're going through some mind.
Okay.
Would probably be beneficial to see that, so
Okay.
I think it would be good.
And we're gonna appoint any board representatives as well.
It's not in the guidelines, but we can certainly have,
Certainly, I think it'd be
yeah.
great to have somebody there. So.
You're saying within the state guidelines.
Correct.
Right, this is not comprehensive, this is a framework that you have to have, and then beyond that, we can open that up.
And you talk about the number of individuals as well.
Right.
Sort of rate, because again, getting some businesses involved, there's other additional benefits sometimes from that. So, do you need numbers or are you looking to?
No, I just was looking for discussion to see kind of what your parameters would be, so that as I bring names back in January, that.
You know, and hopefully you get parents from all the different levels, businesses of different kinds, from manufacturing to an accounting or whatever. And on the other hand, you don't want to have 24 individuals.
Right.
I mean, if we're gonna be looking at them, I'd like some kind of brief summary on them, so that we understand who their background is, kind of, you know, why they wanna be part of this, what kind of additive they have to it.
I think the key is knowing, can they make 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you find difficulties with people from business making 4.
And I'd like to keep a 3-year term, if that's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Only because, I mean, just to get somebody to, you know, sometimes in the first year, you're just getting acclimated to how the process is, and then if you have to change again, I'd rather have that same person be able to commit to 3 years if we can.
And if you're asking people, parents, business leaders, volunteers, they're not gonna come to six. You know, they're gonna, miss 1 or 2, certainly, some
Right.
reason or another.
And there's gonna have to be minutes then provided to ensure that they kept up to speed on those.
At 4 p.m. for community and even for some people that have to.
You have to split it up. Do a couple, and then you have.
You may have to
some
find
more,
5 or 6 works better, just that idea. As I know in different boards where it's all business people you're sitting with, they prefer like a 5:30 type of start.
I like the suggestion of business people would get a manufacturing representative in, as well as business. Manufacturing is very important to us.
Your business, your accountants, your engineers, medical.
You can have kind of a mission statement, goals and everything for this company.
Well, our district mission statement would be what leads the comprehensive plan. So that would be a discussion, at that time, if that's what we want to maintain as our mission statement. I know that was discussed maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if we wanted to move a different mission statement. But that would be something that, would be part of this process.
So 8:45, 9 o'clock.
You mean that we have to look at that before we can do this? I mean, typically that's a board job if we're going to change a mission statement.
That could be a recommendation through the comprehensive planning. The mission statement is what leads the comprehensive plan that we must submit to the state. That's on page 1. we had a discussion at the board level, and it was determined at that time just to maintain it status
Right,
quo.
basically because of everything that's throughout this district on letterhead and everything else and postings and all,
Right.
and just the file cost of it.
All right. Thank you. So now we have, hi, Jody Tess from Township. This is for the step-by-step learning, so I just have a couple questions that you can answer them. So looking in here, it says it's a multi-year, that they suggest a multi-year approach. I see year one.
Correct.
Is there something in works that would be for year two, year three?
Years 2 and 3 would be where we would roll out to teachers and training to teachers. We would start with the letters training, which is done through the IU by training our teaching staff. We've identified in the first year, or I should say year 2, potentially looking at Exynosa, Cheston, and March, but really want to be able to look at our data as it comes in the throughout this year and not make those decisions before they're helping us with our data analysis to determine where we start and then where we roll out to.
So not being privy to all the information on this and just basically reading this. Some of the concerns I have with it, it's $141,000. I don't know what the continual part of it would be after the consecutive years. However, some of the services that are being suggested to be provided are duplication of previous trainings and expenditures that the district has already put out. Some of the data that's referred to in the report is no longer DIBELS endorsed or recommended due to the current research provided by the developers of DIBELS. Some of the benchmark data that they talk about is could be influenced by various things such as summer regression or students who are not necessarily in the district who are now coming into the district and are being evaluated. So, I'm just taking this is quite an expensive thing that we're looking at, and we're using KTO and Title I money, so I want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck here. I also encourage looking at some of the testing that was done years ago, because at that time, there was the MTSS program put in place, actually before the RTF came in. So I'm just looking at some of the things that have been done previously, and they were done through the IU and the TN and things like that. So I'm wondering, is that more cost effective to go through them than to do this? The other concern I have is we talk about going to Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and using the MTSS. And when you're doing that, we've cut specialists. So when you talk Tier 2, Tier 3, and you're implementing it with teachers, are you also going to look at re-implementing some of those specialists?
I don't know if you're looking for answers for.
No, just, we can discuss it later. Thank you for your comments. Okay, so I just have a question. So, next time we're going to have, at next board meeting, we're going to vote on the consulting agreement, correct?
That's right.
And we'll just be talking about the continuing professional education next time also, right?
The continuing professional education, that will be something that I will bring these forward in January,
Okay,
based
yeah.
on the parameters that we discussed this evening.
All right, well, I guess, in summary, talked about the Easton Area Academy report, the K-12 update, the step-by-step consulting agreement that we're going to be voting on next time, and talked about developing the continuing professional education comprehensive planning committee. And I guess that's it then. Okay?
All right, thank you very much. Moving right along, we will look to turn the meeting over to Mr. Snyder, Chair of our Policy Committee.
Thank you, Baron. And I will forward directly to Mr. Neely regarding policy 127.
Sure. Policy 127 is before you this evening, just with some minor changes, but mainly to align the language that we have in this policy to what the state is currently using. The state is no longer referencing our plan as a strategic plan, it's now a comprehensive plan, so the recommendation for just updating that language. Also some recommendations with, in accordance to state and federal law, So in those two areas, should the state or federal law change or be amended, that we don't have to continually update policy. We would always, follow any parent concerns or parent review of state assessments. We would do that in accordance with state law. It no longer has to be during regular district office hours. So these updates are, again, minor, but just to bring us in line with the language the state is currently using.
Okay. Okay. No problem with that. Thank you. Any comments? Any public comment we heard on the policy agenda items? Okay. That being said, just a quick review. The assessment policy is being realigned with basically some language updates.
Thank you very much, Mr. Snyder. In the absence of Mr. O'Day, I will facilitate buildings and grounds. We will hear from Mr. Reinhardt regarding our tax notice.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we presented our information to the preliminary plan to the Eastern City Planning Commission, and it was favorably received, and a few questions were asked. I believe that those were important guiding questions for Josh and Randy to come back and further fine-tune what we submitted. One was related to the lighting of the property, the other was related to water runoff. Yes. So they're going to be looking at that and further defining both of those. We have scheduled for Monday evening a meeting at Paxinosa at 6 o'clock at the building. So I hope that some or all of you can attend that meeting to just meet with any interested residents to talk about the plan. And that's really all that I have at this point. We're proceeding further with the plan to realign our grades, which impacts on this a little bit, but also trying to further look at more specifics in moving the population tax notice to the middle school this year. So it's got a lot of things actually got on the table here with all of these.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reinhardt.
Josh, I think, yes.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to prep the entire board. I know that I distributed a preliminary plan on Part A along with the district-wide facility study. I just wanted the board to be aware. That is something that will require board action at the next meeting on the 17th. Basically, it's just board vote to submit that facility study along with Part A and Part B. Part A is a lot of information with respect to room schedules, actual building information, what types of spaces are there, how big are they, kind of breaks it down into individual spaces. That's Part A. There's also some enrollment information included in Part A. Some of that has been plucked from various sources, including the Pell Report, the district current enrollment, some figures, that's all part of it. Also with Part A, submission timeframe is Part B, which is the schematic, site plan, and building floor plan. Okay, so there's nothing really that the board needs to sign off on as far as Part B goes. It's things that we've been reviewing with the committee members. The site plan, which was presented to the Planning Commission preliminarily last week. So those items will be submitted following the board vote on the 17th.
Yeah, that's quite a document that you're sending out there, and I know that you guys worked very hard on that. Appreciate that very much. I'm related, but are you a father yet?
Yes, yes, I am.
There you go. Congratulations. Great.
Boy. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that's a quick update for you. Okay.
Thanks for the best. Randy, anything you'd like to share with us?
No, I think we went over it a couple weeks ago when we presented you the schematic site plan. We're making those modifications that Mr. Reinhardt had mentioned, and working through the floor plan, and you have that. So I think we'll be back next month with a little more detailed presentation.
Thanks very much.
Oh,
yeah.
You mentioned the
You
meeting
go
on
tomorrow,
Monday.
Pax?
I'd also like to mention there is a meeting as well.
Just call me when you're there.
Thursday, 5:30, 6:15, I believe, and 6:30 to 7:15 for the Paxos community to talk about the transition of that 1 year from Paxos to our middle school campus. And that is being offered twice. The first meeting, certainly for anyone at either point, the first one targeting certainly our English-speaking audience, and the second one being translated in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking population.
What were the times again?
The first one, which is our English-speaking population target, is 5:30 to 6:15 at the Paxos Auditorium, and followed then by 6:30 to 7:15. Where it will be translated.
And has that been shared with media?
It has been sent home with all to those students and residents. I can't speak to whether it went to smaller media.
I know that the briefing idea is shared, it's targeted primarily at parents, so I know it is repeatedly shared.
Yeah. Let's try to get that out to newspaper folks. If there's a way to, I don't know how if our school messenger has the capability of reaching out to the community of school.
And they have done that. They have done that via school messaging as well as flyers and.
When you say it's Thursday,
Yes. Thursday is also a busy day because at 4 o'clock that day is also a ribbon cutting, if you will, or dedication of Cheston's, and I should have said this earlier, but Cheston's community and school program. That is Thursday.
That is.
So never mind, that's another week. Never mind.
So wait, this is this coming Thursday?
This coming Thursday, the 12th.
Oh,
I got it.
Let's get that out to Ruby.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Alrighty, moving right along to
Go to
our
8 o'clock, main entrance.
Yep.
Close us out.
It's a short agenda item here.
Yeah. I'm very sure.
Yes.
Only one thing.
Sue's presenting this one, e-purchasing.
Finale, I hope it's great.
Just as a precursor, again, like everything else, funding dwindles away. We need to do something different and do a different approach for E-rate this year. And Steve can present a quick history of it, what funding is left. I think it's category 2 now, and what we'd like to do with that funding once we get.
For those of you that aren't familiar with E-rate, is a program under the direction of the FCC to provide discounts to schools and libraries for affordable telecommunications and internet access. Historically, our district has been able to take advantage of what they were terming at that point Priority 1 funding to cover internet access, our WAN, local long-distance phone calls, POP lines, cell phone usage, and web hosting. E-rate has now undergone a modernization, which took effect on July of this year, but they didn't actually finalize all the rules until December of 2014. So some of those changes in the funding, what they did was eliminate funding for the web hosting entirely. They implemented a 20% annual phase down of the funding for our POPs lines, cell phones, and local long distance calling. So last school year we were at a 60% discount. This year we're at 40, and next year we'll be at 20 for those services, and then after that they'll be phased out entirely. So in place of that, they are putting money into now what they're calling Category 2. Category 1 will still exist, for internet and WAN, eliminating those, what they're calling legacy technologies of telecommunications. And then there's, go ahead.
Okay.
It's all.
Sorry.
So, part of the modernization has been to implement targets for districts of internet access bandwidth goals. And for the short-term goal, they want us to have 100 megs per 1,000 students and staff. We increased our bandwidth from 200 megs to a gig on July 1st and met that goal. So now we're good, but we need to, the long-term goal we reach for is a gig per 1,000 students and staff. So that would increase us tenfold from what we have at this point. The WAN, you can't see it there, but the long-term goal there is to have 10 gigs per 1,000 students, I believe, right? Yeah.
I'm trying to get that. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why.
10
Oh,
gigs
yeah.
per 1,000 students. Okay. We currently have a 2 gig WAN, which is scalable to 8. The keyword is scalable. So we need to, of course, change our infrastructure with equipment that will make us be able to be scalable to that new goal. So they are putting more funding into the internal connections, which is the Category 2 portion, to fund building of the wireless network, because wireless is really where it's at these days. And so they want schools to be able to make that more robust. So they're providing funding for access points, wireless controllers, routers, switches, installation of all this internal equipment to help us build to those target goals for our internet bandwidth and our WAN, and also to have a robust wireless network. So what they've done is they've established 5-year budgets for districts, and it's based on your student enrollment. So they'll give you $150 per student per building, subject to your then E-rate discount, which is derived from our free and reduced lunch program, and also our rural or urban status. So for Easton School District, we have a 60% discount. So when you apply, you see in this chart how much we have to spend in each school, how much the 5-year budget cap is for E-rate, less our 60%. The 60% they'll fund us, and then our 40% that we would be responsible for. So that's to be spent over a term of 5 years. So if we start this year, we have 4 more years to use that money. So for this year, my goal is to put out an RFP to start getting some of this core equipment in the buildings that will enable us to increase our WAN and internet to those targets that they have established for us. And then also to update the wireless, the access points in the wireless controller at Tracy School. And then you can see I estimated what those costs would be, and then how much the E-rate portion would be, and the district's portion would be out of that money. And just so you're aware, that $67,000 that we would be responsible to pay, that's part of our infrastructure budget that I already have. It's not additional budgeted money that we're asking for. So, any questions?
Sue, as you look at this, like you list all the buildings here, but we also connect to the garage, maintenance building, and things like that, right? Additionally, have you ever looked, because you always have the ongoing costs, have you ever looked at what it would be if we had our own, let's say, line between Palmer Elementary and maintenance building, Tracy, down to the bus garage, as compared to paying, because they're not listed on here, because, and I understand that how you don't really get the same reimbursement that way.
Well, school buildings with no students are not eligible for any E-rate funds.
Right.
But as far as the physical connection, the maintenance garage is attached to
Is it
Palmer,
on?
and transportation is attached to Tracy.
Okay, good.
So their routing is coming from those schools, they're just aligned.
So then the only other one would end up being the campus over here to Shawnee. Are those two connected?
No, I don't, not all the schools are listing on here because I'm not requesting, equipment for every school this year. The middle school campus doesn't need a new core router, we just replaced that a year and a half ago. And it is, at this point, scalable to the goals, so that one doesn't need to be replaced. I don't have Paxinosa on here only because they're undergoing that renovation next year. The Academy's not on here because that's gonna be going away. And the Ed Center's not on here because it's no students and not eligible for category 2.
But when I'm asking connectivity points, Shawnee to the campus. Is
No,
there
they don't
connection?
connect to each other. We connect back to RCN's hub.
Would it be less expensive if we interconnected those two?
I don't believe so. It's not really a building cost, it's the cost of the band for the district. I could ask RCN but I don't see the advantage of it, just because we keep each building on its own separate VLAN and you want to keep that traffic. So I'd rather have it the way it is, keep putting the bus garage, all the Tracy is not an issue. They're all Tracy's. They
Minimal
connect
people.
everywhere.
It's minimal people.
Yes, we want to keep it.
So, if the board's okay, we don't need a motion to authorize it, we don't pay for this equipment, but rather a motion to approve it once we get the prices in.
Right.
Okay? That's what we'll do. If the board's okay with that, and then next time we'll see what the cruising purchase.
All right, sounds
Okay, so in summary,
Thank you, sir.
we were presented with the E-rate purchasing options for specific locations and all, and we're going to go out and get the pricing on that and then bring it back for future approval. Along with that, we've got to ask if there's any trouble being heard. Okay, that concludes that report.
But it just shifts everything around. It did it to Mike's space.
all right. Wow.
We need to get
Once again,
here's the PDF of it.
so many of you, anybody wants to be
That's
heard
true.
on non-agenda? Hearing none, let us motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second.